So GPU scalpers are finally losing big with this guy, the Nvidia RTX 4080. Now, this came out and people assumed that it was going to be scalped like everything else. But look at some data. Look at people scalping them. And look at some of the eBay sales numbers. It's been really, really minimal. Nobody's buying. It's like an 8% sell-through rate, and it's only been like $54,000 in sales since it came out, which in comparatively is much less than the RTX 4090. Look at the 4090 numbers. It's a little bit over a month, but look, over $4 million in sales. This is on eBay, and we're not even counting Facebook Marketplace and various other places where these GPUs are sold. So, as you can see, GPU scalpers are losing big. Now, when this GPU came out at my local micro center, this is the big guy here. It almost looks like an RTX 4090. It's actually like the same cooler. They got a lot of these GPUs in stock, so they said around like 100 or so, compared to about 150 4090s. From my experience in my local store, and I know people have different experiences across the world, and I'm even going to point to different people in Australia and Europe, they're saying that nobody's buying these GPUs as well, and the pricing is even higher over there. But my physical experience in the physical store that I went to, 4090s, there was a lot of people there, and it sold out really, pretty quickly. They had a few left after the first day, but it sold out within that first week, and a lot more people actually bought them. To contrast, this GPU here, the RTX 4080, there were some people there, but they didn't seem to really sell that many. In fact, when I checked the website later on that night and early in the morning, they still seemed to have like 59 left, and they told me they only got 100. And then, of course, immediately I checked Facebook Marketplace, and local resellers were already trying to sell GPUs like this for significant markups. You can actually do a pretty scientific calculation by judging how many people bought it in the store, and in the local metro region, you can see the people selling this GPU and saying they have it in hand, and that's the only place, Micro Center, that you're actually going to get a physical copy of the GPU on launch day. Other places like Newegg, you're going to have to wait for shipping. Even Best Buy doesn't really seem to do in-store drops anymore because Best Buy had a lot of problems with scalpers in the past as well. You guys remember when they used to have like the lines for the Best Buy drops? There were even situations where fights were breaking out. The cops were called several times. People were skipping ahead in line and doing things like that. Micro Center, as far as I know, is the only physical store that actually does in-store drops, which I guess it's a positive because a lot of people have had bad experience buying online. It seems like even though the demand really isn't there for the 4080, these GPUs sold out fairly quickly online. One viewer even had a theory that it's a lot of bots that are buying these GPUs, and then by the time they figure out they can't really be sold, it's a little bit too late, a little bit after. Either they return the GPUs or they get rid of them for cost or whatever it may be. The GPU scalper market, it's actually been a bit of a nuisance the last few years. I mean, that's kind of an understatement. First, of course, crypto mining, incentives really drove it up. Like crypto miners definitely on average would pay more for these type of GPUs. Of course, not this because crypto mining is really dead right now, but in the past for like a 3090, a 3080, any GPU, even LHR, you could say on average a crypto miner would pay more for these GPUs and let's say buy a 3090 at a considerable, scalper markup because they had ROI or return on investment. At least they had it until, Ethereum completely disappeared in September. To contrast, typically gamers really were not willing to pay that big of a markup unless they really wanted a GPU. And even in that case, in the worst cases, you could say they would only really buy one or maybe two, even if they're a really hardcore enthusiast. But crypto miners could repeat the process over and over again because for a certain amount of time, the GPUs were in fact printing money. It's different now, but it sort of came back with the 4090. Of course, reviews were fantastic for that GPU. And even though it's really expensive, it kind of made sense for sort of the tier that the GPU was in. For the performance uplift versus previous generation, it seemed like you can make a blanket statement that most people are now okay with that price to performance of the 4090. Yes, most GPUs should never really be that expensive, over $1,000. But the current market is what it is, and at least the 4090 definitely gives us really good performance. That's where the 4080 comes in. That really did not have the same type of hype or even reviews. A lot of people said this is just way overpriced. Now, the 4090 did have, I would say, a fairly decent secondhand sort of market, like a scalper market. Scalpers really came out in full force. I saw the same thing on release day for the 4090 at my local micro center. Immediately, you could see most of those GPUs, or not most, but a significant amount of them, pop up either on eBay or locally on Facebook Marketplace. Now, the big difference here is I think those definitely sold because the 4090, it disappeared after a certain while, and there's been like sporadic drops and sporadic restocking. And of course, people definitely want the 4090 for the aforementioned performance gains, and it's the highest end GPU. So the 4080 is not the same case at all. Look, even as of today, the local micro center has so many GPUs in stock. Even a popular Asus TUF, which is $1399 version, is 25 plus in stock. Who knows actually how many? Now, obviously the cheaper TUF, which is $1199, did sell out first, and they only have a few copies of that one compared to the more expensive one. But anyway, if people are willing to pay, scalper prices, you would think they'd be willing to pay for one of these higher end models. Now, another GPU I was curious about if it was going to sell or not is the Strix 4080, because that one is $1549, the most expensive 4080 by far, but it is an Asus Strix, which is a pretty desirable GPU. I mean, I happen to like the design. I just really hate the price because it's right next to the price of a base 4090. And we know that amongst like the 4090s, there really isn't that big of a performance difference from the base one and the most expensive one. So you can assume the same is true for the 4080. That's why it doesn't make any sense to pay almost 4090 price for a 4080. But they definitely still sell, and I was monitoring one local store. Yesterday they had 14 in stock of this expensive 4080. As of today, it looks like they sold 3, and another store had 1 and they sold that. I mean, I don't know. Is it really enthusiast buying these? I do see a potential sort of scalper market for that GPU. As expensive as it is, believe it or not, I saw one sell on eBay, if it's legit or not, for $19.99. Basically, this scalped 4080 went more or less for the price of a 4090, which is definitely pretty ridiculous. And we're not talking about the base 4090, we're talking about the most expensive Strix 4090. That shows you what type of damage these markups do. They bring a GPU that's already ridiculously expensive and it sells for even more. That's sort of a very rare instance. This is the only one that I really saw of this. Like on launch day, the Strix for the 4090 was also the most expensive, and believe it or not, those sold out immediately. Here, the 4080, they had 14 sitting in stock, down to 11 now. So that shows you that people really are not buying these with any type of enthusiasm at anywhere near the rate of the 4090. If scalpers were buying these 4080s, they would have bought up all of these Strix, which are generally pretty desirable, and tried to sell them on eBay, but we're definitely not seeing that happen. And I know people will point out this is at a local store, and people think that, okay, maybe a local demand is one thing compared to nationwide or worldwide demand, but you guys have to remember as well, we did see these GPUs stay in stock longer on Newegg. They even popped up at various times after the launch, much more than the 4090, and they stayed in stock for a significant amount of time. I saw the MSI Trio pop up. I saw various gigabyte GPUs come up. So they're definitely showing up online. And then to go further, international viewers who watch me, look, they post in the comments right below. I'm sure they're going to post right in this video. They have tons in stock, not only of the 4080, but it's a weird phenomenon. The 4090 is sold out in the US mostly, but overseas, because of higher pricing, it's pretty readily available across many different countries. So 4080, similar story. Resellers are not buying them in various countries, and they're staying in stock. And now we're seeing this happen even in the US. I think Micro Center is a good barometer of what's going on with the general market. They are in pretty big metro areas, so you can assume that a lot of enthusiasts will live there, and a lot of people will be within a few hours drive, depending on where they live, of these micro centers, and we can see it reflected online as well. Does the RTX 4080 really signal sort of the downfall of scalpers in the GPU market? Now, it could also be that the scalpers are really having a tough time because the 4080 is not a popular GPU, the 4090 being an exception. What about AMD's RDNA 3? 7900 XTX at $999 seems to have pretty incredible performance from the leaks that we've been seeing and from the numbers so far provided by AMD. Now, we can assume that the AIB models will be more expensive when they hit the shelves, probably close to the price of the 4080. You can say, though, that the hype behind these AMD GPUs much higher than what we're seeing with the 4080. Because of the lower price point, you could say the hype might even be more than the 4090, and the 4090 certainly was scalped successfully for a period of time, and it still is today. Does that mean that scalpers are going to come back when these AMD GPUs launch next month? I think there's a pretty good chance of it. Remember, AMD typically has smaller market share, meaning that usually they're going to have less GPUs available than Nvidia on these major launches. That's been true in the past. Now, maybe now they're not as focused on Ryzen CPUs, and this will be a chiplet design for the GPUs, maybe insinuating that they're going to be produced in better capacity, but we really don't know yet what stock and availability will be like. I know the reference models usually are difficult to get, and those are usually the flat MSRP of $899 or $999 if you're looking at both of the 7900 GPUs. There is no market for it, at least at this point, with the 4080. So yeah, it's a pretty cool and fast GPU. Power draw is fine. Performance is definitely better than anything from last generation, but it's definitely probably $500 too expensive, and the market is definitely reacting, throwing out scalpers with the bathwater, if you will, in the meantime. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.